I'm John Griffin. I'm the Australian ambassador to Athens. I'm here with my partner, Pakapat. We've been here since July 2014. It's a 3-year posting, so I'll be heading off again back to Canberra in July this year. Well, economic diplomacy, which is the flash new term for trade and investment, is a very important part of an ambassador's job. And so I've done my best to promote trade and investment, which has always been quite modest between Greece and Australia. A lingering impression of Australia in some circles in Greece, including business circles, of a faraway, Anglo, strange country with rural and primary industries. And you have to load things into ships and sail them halfway around the world to England. We do our best to project a different image of Australia, which is multicultural, dynamic, diverse. 70-something% of our economy our GDP is services-based, and you don't need to load services into ships. So I've spent quite a lot of time promoting a different image of Australia. I've also done my best to promote, to highlight areas of complementarity between the Australian economy and the Australian economic experience and the Greek experience. When you look at what Greece has got that could generate wealth, which could help to grow the economy, to grow out of recession, out of the crisis. Greece has got a fantastic tourist industry, it's the main money earner, but it's really very limited. It's April to September, San Souvlaki, and then nothing. Whereas winter tourism, cultural tourism, agricultural tourism, ecotourism, all this sort of stuff is talked about, and Australia's done it quite well, but it needs long-term strategic thinking and investment. Also food and wine. Greek food and wine is fantastic, which was news to me. When I came here, I used to think Greek wine, you think Retsina, which is fine up to a point. But the variety and the quality of boutique Greek wines it blows you over. The quality of food here. And then when you think of the Australian experience, which has been developing agribusiness, niche, high-end, good quality wines and foods, it's something Greece could profit from. So I've been trying to promote synergy, similarities, complementarities between the two countries. The main thing in Athens and Greeks generally, is the impact of a long crisis which shows no sign of ending. And so that has an effect on people, on their outlook, particularly young people with youth unemployment so high, youth migration to Western Europe looking for work, and the fabric of the city, which is suffering. But, as I said, you also come across solidarity and resilience and courage in the face of all of that. So, yeah, Greece is eternal. First of all, Australia, there's a lot of Greeks in Australia, 600,000 of them, self-selected. We don't identify people by nationality. People identify themselves. So some organisations, like the Church, think the number is even higher, but the census gives us 600,000 Greek Australians out of a population of 24 million. So it's a very sizable minority. But a lot of the origin of that minority was in the period of mass migration to Australia after World War II. Australia is still a country of migration, but not of mass migration. Family migration has been steadied around 250 a year, having risen to about 400 in the peak years of the crisis, 2012, 2013. Skilled migration is up from about 90 a year to 130 in 2015-16. And student visas are steadied around 600 to 700 a year, having peaked at about 850 in 2012-13. Lots of Greeks may have visited and gone there to study and come back, for various reasons, but if we're talking permanent migration, they're the numbers. There's quite a lot of two-way traffic. 8,400 short-term arrivals into Australia from Greece per year, and that's a 13% increase on the previous year. And in the other directions, Australians coming into Greece is 83,700, and that's a 3% increase. Oh, they like the fact that it's a very welcoming environment to Greeks, because there's so many Greeks in Australia. And they like the fact, like most Europeans, that it's a new country in terms of European settlement. It's a new country, it's got energy, it's got space. It's a country which is self-confident and living in a region of growing prosperity. So, no, and of course the nature is fantastic. They always come back raving about that. Before they go, they're all a bit scared about poisonous snakes and spiders, but they quickly realise that you don't actually meet them every day in the street. No, when they come back, the impressions are always uniformly positive. Yes, I find young Greeks are quite interested in Australia, quite passionate about the idea of going there. That may explain some of the uptick in tourist numbers. People who've got the means want to go and check it out and maybe look for opportunities there. As I said, there is, in some more traditional circles, there is an outdated perception of Australia as a sort of faraway, strange, rural, Anglo country, the sort of Australia that the original Greek migrants might have encountered in the 60s. Maybe that's been handed down. But young Greeks have a fairly accurate impression of the new, vibrant Australia. Investors have choices, as another ambassador around town is fond of saying. And Greece has been in a crisis situation now for 6 or 7 years. We all hope Greece will come out of the crisis soon, but there's some hard yards to go before that happens. There have been several changes of government, and partly in response to the creditor demands, the economic goalposts in Greece keep shifting. So it's not a very predictable environment in which to do business. And as I also said earlier, investors look at things like the World Bank Ease of Doing Business Index, and Australia is 15 in that index, and Greece is 61. And the government, the previous government in Greece, they're committed to trying to improve that situation, do away with unnecessary regulation, cut through red tape, modernise the civil service, but it's still work in progress. So for all those reasons, it's been hard to attract the attention of Australian investors to Greece. Shining white hope, however, is because that's on the bilateral front, what I've been talking about, is an Australia-EU free trade agreement, which Australia has been proposing for some time. It's just finishing up its scoping study between Australia and the EC in Brussels. And if that gets going, which we sincerely hope it will, it'll have a boost to bilateral trade and investment for Greece and Australia. I think historically you'll find that Australia has been very generous to Greece and vice versa. This is a bit of a sidetrack, but I'm struck by the number of Greeks when I go around doing my official job saying, oh, we're so grateful to Australia for taking so many poor Greeks in the 1950s and 60s. I always stop them and say, no, it's a two-way street. You know, the Australia that I grew up in, that my mother, who's still alive, thank heavens, that she remembers before World War II, was remarkably different and more limited than the country with Australia, the successful multicultural, dynamic Australia that migrants like Greece have helped to produce. So it's been a mutually beneficial two-way street. So that relationship is strong. We fought with Greece in 2 world wars. I've mentioned earlier the centenary of Anzac celebrations commemorations on Lemnos, where the attack was launched from. It was a hospital station. And the Battle of Crete last year, 75th anniversary, very, very moving because modern-day Cretans still remember and have pictures of their father or their uncle with Australian soldiers they were sheltering before they could be captured or evacuated to Egypt. So strong, when Greece is in trouble, Australia tends to put up its hand. I was really struck was early on. We had a weekend in Nafplio, and I saw the church doorstep where Capodistria was assassinated. And it's a beautiful town, and very Italianate in a way, the way it embraces the sea. And then we drove to the ruins of Mycenae, and it was my first exploration of Greek ancient ruins, and they're not overrun with tourists. And there's hillsides covered with olive trees and the sheep bells in amongst them, and it was utterly magical for that brief magical moment, I could understand why people are absolutely get infatuated with Greece as a young man and then stay infatuated forever. Both that the nature of the ruins was very, very haunting, very different from the standard classical Hellenistic Greek period, very haunting, and the site was superb. So that's my most memorable memory. Well, I arrived with strong, healthy Philhellenic tendencies, but I think I'm leaving Greece with a more rounded appreciation of contemporary Greece. Greeks here from Greece who go to Australia will tell me, can't possibly comment, that the Greeks in Australia are passionately attached to Greece, or more specifically to the village or the town that they came from, or the island they came from. So that's the Greece I know, obviously, the Greek-Australian Greece. Coming here, seeing a people which has had a lot to put up with, internally and externally, historically and in contemporary terms, gone through things which would have caused social unrest. Well, there is social unrest here, but but more serious social unrest. But there's a certain sense of, as I mentioned earlier, a certain sense of stoicism and resilience about the Greeks, which is quite admirable. When things got very serious in terms on the banking front in the middle of 2015, and they imposed capital controls for the first time, and it was 60 euros a day out of the ATMs. Quickly went to 50 euros because the banks ran out of 10 euro notes. And so you'd see, going down, just down at my intersection here, there's a row of banks and a row of cafes, and you'd see people forming very orderly queues, no pushing and shoving as you would see elsewhere, just orderly queues every day to get their 50 euros. And then next to them were the cafes, absolutely full with people drinking, smoking, laughing, talking. Life went on. So yeah, that sort of aspect of Greek resilience in the face of adversity has been an enlightening and uplifting experience for me.